Yep, absolutely. No. So the city government asked for this plant to build, and they asked a private firm to build it. So the city government did not provide subsidies per se. They just promised, the regular wastewater treatment fee with the bottom line. The private firm built it at over capacity. They're not going to make money out of this plant. I'll show you another example. This is a waste incineration plant. So this plant, you will see, is a real fancy plant. What it does here is to try to solve the problem of dirty soil, and they claim that they have the world-class, technology to make sure that the air coming out of the incineration plant does not have high level of dioxin in it. So what is peculiar about this plant is that it's really beautiful. So I want to look at it. It's one of those postmodern kind of architecture. They hired a very famous, architecture studio to design the outer face of it. But inside, you will notice that it doesn't even have a waste separation facility, meaning they're in fact burning your kitchen garbage, paper, and plastic all together, which is not why you will have a modern incineration plant for, right? There's no recycling, there's nothing about the quality of it. It is also, by the way, built by a private company, and then the government did not give any subsidy on construction per se. What we then observe is waves of this kind of developmental project in terms of aiming at cleaning air and water, etc., rise in China over the past 15 to 20 years. What you're seeing now is interesting. Once you start to see these projects going up, you start to see the landscape of companies in this sector change. So previously, a lot of this sector were actually occupied by private companies. So state-owned enterprise do not usually go into this very small city projects. But now with these projects going up, you start to see deprivatization happening across sectors. I am particularly interested in two of them. I will present one of them today. So one of them is actually public transportation. So this is urban bus. So public transportation was one of those sectors that the central government says we need to modernize and we need to provide better public service and cleaner bus services. That's one sector I look at. The other is solid waste treatment. So starting from 2016, I'll show an updated graph here. You will see private firms also deteriorate. So now, like at 2016, you will have 70% of firms in the waste incineration sector to be private. Today, only 35%. So you will see the private firms start to go away with all of these environmental initiatives. The bus part is the most shocking. It was almost completely private, but now in China, it's almost completely public. So I'm going to tell you what's going on in this sector. Here is, by the way, a geographic distribution of the change of landscape in China's bus sector. So you will have all of these red cities. These are cities. These red cities, they once were dominated by private bus companies, but nowadays they are renationalized into city government's hands. And then you will have the yellow cities. These are cities that were never privatized in history in terms of bus service. And then you will have the blue cities. They were also privatized, but the city governments did not touch them. They remain in private companies' hands. So I'm going to try to answer the question of what is the connection between Chinese central government saying we're going to now focus on environmental protection, and then at the city level, you start to see sectoral change in terms of company ownership. So this is a political economy question built in the environmental context. And to answer this question, I'm going to explore the variation across cities in ownership change and across time. Why does it happen somewhere but not other places? And why does it happen at this particular time in history? So I'm going to give you a roadmap of what I'm going to cover, some literature explanations of nationalization, and then I'm going to provide you a political economy explanation. And then I'm going to show you some quantitative analysis and then case studies to try to figure out the causal mechanism of this change in ownership. So this is what I did. These are the cities that I had fieldwork in throughout 4 years. The longest leg I was in China was about 18 months at the time. And then I interviewed people in 3 sectors. So I have bus, I have waste incineration, and I have wastewater. In the book, I only covered 2 of them. In today's talk, I'm only going to talk about the buses. And so a regional city level database. So in the literature, how do people explain nationalization of companies? These are very common things. One, if you worry about key strategic sectors that is dependent on foreign capital, you worry about national security, you nationalize them. So you will see a lot of the cases, for example, in oil and high tech. You will have predatory state. If this is a highly profitable sector, you're going to predate on the sector and get the assets back. Now, these two clearly doesn't apply to buses, for example, right? Nobody cares about city buses. You will also have limited regulatory capacity or incomplete contract problem. So if this is a sector that's very complicated, very hard to regulate, and the sector keeps producing problems, negative externalities, you will probably have the state coming in and take over. Clearly, again, not this issue with bus. China's bus sector has been very successful in the past 20 years of providing public transportation. And then you will have this one, fail new public management, which will mean corruption, etc., and inefficiency. So I'm going to tell you why these are not really the right explanation for buses. Yes. Yes.
The second point, where states, yes, for me it's the universe thing that when it's profitable, state selling private company.
Interesting.
In Europe, at least in France, when the states make money, they sell it to private sectors.
That's not predation, though, right? If the state is selling state-owned enterprises, they're just selling what belongs to them, right? So they sell state-owned enterprise, right? That's what you meant, right? Yeah. So that will be the opposite. So here, the predatory state, at least in this literature, is talking about the state become aggressive and intrude into a private sector and take private assets back into the state's hands. So it's the opposite trend.
It's like nationalization of property.
No, I understand the idea, but
so it's the state violating property rights.
Private company is, I understand it's political strategy makes them keep it, want to keep it back. But when there is make some profits, states tend to sell its own property. For at least what I saw.
Yeah,
in Europe.
So the phenomenon absolutely true, but it's just that we don't quite call that predatory state. There's a whole literature about privatization that's talking about what goes wrong with privatization, right? So that's absolutely what you're talking about. This literature is for the next round. Like, why do state take away private assets without a justified, legit explanation? Yeah. So one interesting thing, an example of a predatory state would be, for example, China today. So fintech, all of these financial tech companies are making money, right? And they're creating this mortgage market. And the Chinese, they look at it, one, they think this is a lot of risk for the society and they couldn't regulate it. Second, it really is highly profitable. So the Chinese state suddenly comes in without any legal backing and say, we're going to nationalize fintech. All of them have to emerge into state-owned. So that is that literature. So what I'm going to tell you, explain this, nationalization of the bus sector under this background of environmental initiative would be a political economy explanation based on incentives of government officials. Why do they do that? I'm going to show that it is not for money. It is not because of regulatory difficulties. It is for politics. It's for political incentives. So a little bit background of what Chinese local officials are driven by. Where do their incentives come from? Chinese officials, let's assume, if they are the same as any politician in this world. There are many of them, they're highly ambitious. What they want is to be promoted up the government ladder, which will bring not just power and wealth. Now, the interesting thing about Chinese official is how do they get promoted? This is not a democracy, right? It's a totally purely top-down control system. To get promoted, you have to get approval and acknowledgement from your superior, your upper level boss. How does your boss make the decision? So this is a 1993, so I got this in the field. It is a cadre, something called performance evaluation of the cadres. The word comes from Soviet Union. What it does is that it is a long list of policy targets for every single city official in China. This list goes on. There will be 110 something on this list. So the boss will look at all of these city officials. This is a national institution and say, here's what you need to do next year. Achieve all of these policy goals. So the first one here, for example, is income per capita for your constituency. They have to reach the target of 1,180 this year. And that will mean you will have a 4.3% increase. These are all mandated from the top, tons of targets. And then the upper level official at the end of the year will come back and collect. These are all self-filled in, like, this is the actual amount that we achieved for the policy target. How well did I do? The upper level official comes in, collect every city official's data in this province, comparing them and say, CTA's leader did the best job. So he's gonna get the best score in this evaluation system. So this is one of the key of the evaluation pillars. However, the system is full of problems because it's so rigid, right? Imagine your upper level official said, next year you have to publish, 7 papers, right? Not 6, not 8. And then you're going to be like, how can I best achieve 7 papers? I'm going to divide my current 3 papers into 7, publish them in whatever journal I get, right? There's a lot of gaming going on in the system. So tons of research actually shows moral hazard gaming and data fabrication. These are all the common things observed in China's performance evaluation system. Local officials would, the crassest way is to just make up data. Like GDP growth was actually 5%, but I'm going to report 9%. Same thing for everything. You can also have gaming. So one of the very interesting story was that, for example, one of the cities got this target from the boss. The boss said, you are a big husbandry city, so you have sheep. Great, we want more sheep. Next year, give us 1 million sheep. Now, this city started from 150,000 sheep. How do you let the animals multiply? They don't multiply that way, right? So what the city official would do is to go around and literally rent it and borrow sheep from neighboring county. On the day of evaluation, bring them in. Here you go, 1 million sheep. So you have tons of this kind of behavior going on using a quantitative performance evaluation system. What that does is it makes Chinese local officials become disillusioned. So they know that we surely need to do well in the system, but that is a prerequisite. This is like, I want to get admitted to Harvard. I need to have a good SAT score, right? But I need to do more. I'm going to do social work. I'm going to provide extra things to show that I have other achievements. So this is where what I described, the project started to show up. What the local officials are going to do is they think hard about how can I prove that I am better than everybody else in a system that is so gamed and everyone will have a good SAT score. So what they're going to do is they engage, to look around for opportunities. They decided the best thing to do is to engage national policy goals that are new. These new goals are clearly the priority of the national government, but the national government doesn't quite know yet how to deal with them. This is your opportunity. You create projects, you create policy mandates. Through these new things, you might stand up like beyond your other contemporaries. So what that means is you will see, I'm going to show you visibility projects. So this is what I call, I'm going to show you what these projects are very quickly. They invent stuff to cater to policy goals and they say, look, this is what we can do. I define visibility projects as pseudo-development projects with a primary purpose to signal competence and loyalty. So this is why you have to engage with national policies, not just invent anything. This is still an authoritarian state. It's top-down. You can be creative, but you cannot be too creative. You become too creative, you are not towing the party line of the Chinese Communist Party, it becomes dangerous. So you work within national policy goals, and then you try to invent signal competence. The goal of this kind of development projects is totally to seek attention from your superior. It's not about the people also. It's about your boss for a career advancement. So let's show you a little bit more examples of what visibility projects are, other than the wastewater and waste incineration. So this is a solar farm, but it's not just your regular solar farm. This is a solar farm in the shape of a giant panda. So this farm it takes a 250-acre. And they did not, if you look at the land use, it's not the most efficient way for arranging the solar panels. It's not just grids like that. It's a panda. So the whole point of this panda project is that it's not just a solar farm that everybody else is building, but it is a different solar farm. Like it shows an image. It shows how creative we are. It's huge if you ever get a chance to look down from the sky. So that would be one of your visibility projects. Here are more serious ones. So this is a forestation project. This is also responding to national environmental initiative that says there's so much desert in Northwest China, we need to bring trees in. But the question is, what kind of trees do you bring? Now, the quickest growing tree is poplar. So for any poplar tree, it only takes 2 years to grow into a doll-sized, huge forest. You immediately see the result almost. But this place, these photos are taken, is a northwestern city in China where poplar is absolutely not the right tree for it. Poplar needs a lot of water. So if you do not actually actively, irrigate these trees, they're going to die out very soon. So this new city mayor, he decided, I'm not going to listen to, getting all of the desert trees, which would take 10 to 15 years to become adult. I want poplar. So he took a lot of money, built up this poplar forest, kept it alive for 2 years. He got promoted afterwards. His successor had no incentive to maintain whatever project he installed. So this photo is taken 5 years after the poplar trees were planted, and this is completely dead. So the forest was a waste. So these are your usual visibility projects. Another example, very happening right now, is robot towns. So China is trying to catch up, right? Or say, keep us a leader in AI and robots. So central government says this is absolutely a priority. Go, local governments, experiment, bring us robots. So you suddenly see local governments invest in these tiny little towns in semi-rural area where they cannot attract talent, where they don't have enough infrastructure, but they build a small town, put a lot of office space in and call it a robot town. So this is a town dedicated to developing AI. You suddenly see hundreds of them, flooding Chinese cities. So these are visibility projects, pseudo development, not quite developmental. There are several features of these projects compared to your regular development projects. Number one, they're initiated by local governments. They're responding to central policy goal for sure, but they're never really required by the formal evaluation system. So this is the number one feature. Tap into something new. Whatever the central government thinks is a priority, but the central government has no idea how to do it yet, tap into that thing. The second thing is it does not really speak to local demand. These are not initiated by what the locality needs. It's initiated by what is new and hot in the minds of the national government. And then the third one is because the purpose of visibility projects is to show your competence to get promotion, you need to get it done quickly. It has to be grand, it has to be quick, but because after your promotion, your successor will not be able to claim credit from your project, your successors usually do not have the incentive to maintain them. So they will also be short-lived. A lot of them will be abandoned based on change of administration in a locality. Now, this is not to say they do not have developmental effects. Some of them still might. It's just that that's never the primary reason to launch a visibility project. So I'm going to show you a typology, which I really love comment on. How do we discern a project is a visibility project when we see one, right? Not after a few years, we notice that it goes to waste. So I'm proposing that we think about project from 2 dimensions, basically where the demand comes from. It could be coming from, so this is in a strictly top-down authoritarian political environment. If decision-making is purely top-down, then there are 2 sets of demands any policymakers are thinking about and they want to meet. One set is the local demand, and the other set is what the national government wants them to do. So if the local officials are trying to meet only local demand, if these projects do not have any central government initiative attached to them, those are most likely developmental. So these are, for example, school lunch at the local schools, right? The central government doesn't think about it, doesn't care about it, but you launch a school lunch project, that's probably developmental. Same thing goes into clinics, hospitals, etc. A lot of soft, invisible things. So they could be developmental. Now, the other ideal type, if there's no local demand at all, as what we were talking about, or if a project does not actually fit into local demand, but it is highly desirable by your boss, by the national government, you launch them. A lot of time, these projects are in the purpose of being visible, to signal to your boss that I'm doing this, even though it goes against local demand. And then you have 2 more less ideal types. So if we see projects that neither the locality nor the central government wants it, it is nonetheless built. So a lot of these could be, for example, a bridge to nowhere, a road that is paid 3 times a year. Most likely those are for rent seeking. So they're under the radar. Nobody needs them, they're done nonetheless. Now, the best project for anyone is that there is both local demand and a central demand. Total legitimacy, justification is provided. you then absolutely go do these projects. And they have dual purpose. They are developmental, shows you're a good official, but they're also visible. So it signals to your boss. So in China, you will see this cell, developmental projects, are probably the smallest focus of any local official because they do not get a lot of credit for them. You will see a lot of developmental visible projects. You will see a little bit less of visibility projects. So these two cells are absolutely the focus of local officials. These ones, they want to hide it. They want to hide it as much as possible. By the way, feel free to, any question, comments, anything. Yeah.
But maybe I'm listening to you thinking about my own experience in French administration. In the US, sometimes I feel well, it's exactly the same. So can you tell us what the specific timeline?
So I wonder, this is interesting. I have a co-author who studies visibility in Brazil, also democratic context. So we were talking about this. I think one interesting thing is what kind of project you launch. So his observation is when you do like visibility projects in a democratic context, you're thinking about your voters. So this is a different incentive. You probably build a huge soccer stadium. That's what he sees the most. You see like parks where children can play. So they still tap into local demand. In a top-down environment, then you tap to top demand a little bit. So I think that would be the difference in nature. Like what kind of French projects were you thinking about? Because this will be helpful to me too.
We discussed it later.
Okay, sure.
For me, the same in research and project is exactly what you said. You said in 20, it was biodiversity. And now it's without human parts in the project, there is no chance to find funds. So it's exactly the same. There is top-down work, there is top. And you do not write it, you do not have the project. So there is a fashion that you have to follow to be fun. For me, it's it's the same.
So maybe it's not as gigantic as what you're showing us here.
Yeah.
But my sense is that in every big administration you have this quote perversion, market theory or whatever.
Yeah. No, I absolutely, I would love for this concept to be more universal and generalizable because it is a phenomenon we see everywhere, right? But so I've thought about, forget about government either, just say top down. So if this is in a pure top down environment, it could be a company, it could be a university, government, it could be an authoritarian state. But then when I think about, say, for example, in a government or a business, top down, you have these two needs to meet. What goes here though? So I will think in a company or government, you will not have much of rent-seeking projects, right? This cell will be empty, is my guess. If low boss doesn't care, your subordinates don't care in a business, you probably will do nothing here. I could just put in there. And I'm not sure, I
guess in the rent-seeking projects, like very getting right corruption, like you're just taking money from the company to for yourself or
Yeah, I guess I could still call it rent-seeking, but I would say the likelihood of the occurrence of these projects depend on the institutional environment. So if you have very strict internal auditing, for example, this would not show up, but that would still be the same nature. Yeah, I'll be thinking about this. That is very true. That is very true. Yeah, sure. No, I agree. I would like to be this to be more generalizable.
But one thing is totally different what you are saying is that the local politicians change their minds to adapt themselves to be well noted by the top level. That's it.
Yeah. So that's what I'm developing. And I don't like this phrase. So I'm still thinking about this table. Any comments will be great. So back to the firms. So because here we're talking about the outcome that I'm interested in is why would these projects change sectoral landscape of firm ownership, right? Why would it kill off private firms? So this is where state business firms come in. In an authoritarian state where you do not have, a comprehensive and mature market institution, right? You have pseudo property rights. You don't really have a functional legal system to protect private rights. firms, particularly private companies, they really are very cooperative when it comes to the relationship with Chinese government. They know their business depends on the Chinese government, so they work, to make the bosses, to make the officials happy. So usually when the local government officials want to launch a visibility projects, if these projects are too big and too expensive, local officials think about their constraint, and their constraint will be they really could not risk being called misspending public money or wasteful public spending. So they go to the private companies in the sector and say, why don't you guys do it? This is your business, do this for us. Usually private firms will go along. So they either worry about the, later political revenge from the local officials if they say no, or they will think this might be an opportunity. If I do this one favor for the local official, I will get some business perks later. So they will go for it. But the issue is these projects are large. And remember, they're usually short-lived and they're not maintained very well. So the cost is very high. A lot of times, over time, private firms realize we're losing money doing these things and we're not getting enough returns from the local officials. So when costs rise, you will see the firm stop sponsoring, contributing to these projects. This is when tension would arise between the local government and the business, and which is a very important reason for why Chinese local state would nationalize a business. So I'm going to show you this mechanism through the bus. So why is bus involved in this whole thing? Because bus matters for clean air. Clearly, a lot of pollution from the old type of buses. And to promote clean air, you also want people to drive less. So buses satisfy that goal, right? Less private vehicles. You will see a lot of central, very vague central policy directives in all of these years and say, we want more people to take buses in China, less private cars. So that's why bus became a very active sector in the whole environmental initiative. There are 3 types of visibility projects in the bus sector that I identified through interviews. The first one is a purely reputational one. This one is interesting. It's called the National City Title Competition. So Chinese central government says, cities, all of you. So this is what Chinese central government is very good at. It makes cities compete with each other. They're like, we're going to give you a national title that says you're the best city this year in the country. So one set of the standards for national city is how clean the city is. Are you green? Are there garbage on the streets? Is your water clean? All of this. Bus is a very important part of the national city title. So this is a quote from a leader about why this is important. Winning a title is an important line, so leaders care about these titles very much. Buses are important because it's literally on the superficial level, the city local officials will order all the bus companies to repaint their bus into the same color. They order the bus companies to take off all the advertisements from their bus, etc. They want the buses to look the same. Beautiful, clean, new, the same. So it's a small cost, but it's not that much. Bus companies happily go with national city title application. The second type of visibility project is more catering to the clean air part. So these are the purchase of new buses. So usually the contract between the local government and the bus company is, it goes every 20 years, they renew it. And then for each fleet of the bus, the expiration date for them is usually between 8 to 10 years. It's no more than that. And so those are all in the contract. But a lot of the times you will see local government officials telling the bus companies that we need new type of buses. Usually they mean the buses have to be fueled on a different fuel, a cleaner fuel, or the buses have to be high capacity. So each bus accommodates not 80 people, but 200 people. So these are extra content requirement of the bus companies as part of their projects, and it's aesthetically pleasing. So I'm going to show you some examples of fun bus innovations in China. That is just your regular LPG bus, but there is a funny issue. The way that China converted a lot of the buses into the new LPG fuel is that an old bus with an adapted engine, and then you put in new fuel because they don't have money to completely replace the bus type. So a lot of research later find out that if you do not have a compatible engine for LPG, LPG is going to be polluting either way. So that's your LPG bus. This is a really fun one. So this one was invented in a northern Chinese city upon the request of a local official. This is a high capacity bus. It's called straddling bus. So the whole idea is that you have this bus, it will accommodate 600 to 800 people. The bus is up there, but then it's gonna be hollow. So under this giant bus, you will have private cars like drive under the bus. So it's not taking up road space. It's going to, relieve congestion. But there's just a little hiccup about this driving bus. It does not make a turn. It can only drive on the straight line. So whenever it makes a turn, all of the private cars are gonna panic because they don't know, how do you do that? And so this bus was launched as one of those, literally like the pillar of bus visibility projects. And then it was abandoned after 3 months, but it was actually on the road for 3 months. So that's a kind of new type buses that Chinese governments experiment with. A lot of fun models.
Isn't there any issue with trucks? Because obviously it's not very high, and like if you have I
know.
Okay.
There are a lot of issues with this bus.
Okay.
Great concept, but yeah.
Do you know what city is that? Because I have never been connected. Like I never even heard of it. Do you know what city is that?
秦皇岛, Hebei province. Yeah.
I've seen a lot of publicity of like advertisement campaign about like this type of new technology in internet, and like everyone was.
Yeah.
It is a disaster, but like it's like internet love this type of futuristic project.
Yeah, there are a lot of fun invention. When it came out, we were all in awe, and then we were thinking about the Disney cartoon. Remember the Bugs journey? So there was a giant bug, like, and then there are a lot of newspaper articles like put this bus and the giant bug side by side, like China is. But anyways, that was not actually done. Yeah. So that was your new type of buses. And then the last one is the BRT system. So the BRT system actually would be very developmental if we use it right. So Latin America is the first place where you see all of this BRT system build up. So it is, for those of you who might not know, it's enclosed dedicated bus lanes with a priority of buses at intersections, right? So the private buses do not get to go on the BRT. So this is an example of BRT system. You used to have 6-lane roads, and now you're going to like exclusively reserve the center 2 for just buses. These are private. So this is Guangzhou City. BRT in itself is a great concept. Developmental project proven successful in a lot of countries. The issue of how it was launched in China is the problem. Because BRT system is so, such a huge infrastructure project, completely changing our bus system. It's one of those most popular systems for city leaders to launch. The issue is when you design the roads or redesign the roads, you need to be very careful because it could go wrong in intersections. Whenever this road needs to turn or meet other roads, if you don't design it right, it could go wrong. But in these cities, because leaders want promotion, right? They have a window of promotion every 5 years at most. They're thinking about promotion every year. They hastily launched the BRT system. They did not do enough feasibility projects. So in 23 Chinese cities with BRT, 14 actually had worse congestion problem, going against where BRT is 4. And then 5 already demolished the system after a pure 2 to 3 years. So it was a total waste of money. What is the role of bus companies in BRT is that they have to cut regional routes because they are now merging into BRT system. So they lose ticket price. They also have to change their bus models again to high capacity buses. So BRT buses are much bigger than your regular bus for exactly the capacity issue. They also lose money there. So the bus companies usually without a right financial arrangement with the government, they resist BRT. So this is the issue with bus company. So I'm going to simply test that in any city that launched all of these 3 projects, will these projects actually hurt the prospect of private company survival in this sector? So it's a very simple survival analysis. I'm going to spare you of the details. The dependent variable though is your typical survival is the duration, is the lifespan of private firms in the city. And then I'm going to test, all of the 3 events, etc., and then controlling for the usual variables. So this is the first set of results. It's basically saying, so none of these variables really matter, but if you have, I take out BRT, by the way, because BRT turned out to be 100% causing private companies to leave the city. So I take it out from this model, and then you will have applying to city titles, and then to purchase any new type of buses, it's going to drastically hurt the lifespan of private companies. Here's another thing. Sometimes if you just launch 1 visibility project, 2 visibility projects, it doesn't matter. The private companies can't afford it. So frequency actually matters a lot. Do you launch many projects in a short time span? Now, this is a frequency analysis. You will see that, yes, the higher projects, so this is the 5 projects every 3 years versus 0 project every 3 years, you will see the lifespan of the private sector in the bus sector will collapse way sooner. So higher the frequency of launching, the worse it is for private firms. So I'm going to show you very briefly. This is just correlation so far, right? In the survival analysis, is it actually causal? Could it be something else that's driving the demise of the private sector? I'm going to show you a case comparison to test the model. 2 cities, 2 capital cities in neighboring provinces. So this is Guangzhou in Canton province and then Nanning in Guangxi province. So in Nanning, you saw much, much less launch of visibility projects. The reason of their officials being so unambitious is because they just had a huge corruption scandal. So the whole province was clamped down and everybody wanted to lay low. No one actually wanted to draw attention from the upper level government. Guangdong was the opposite, the richest province in China. And so you have many ambitious officials trying to get their way ahead. So this is just a simple time frame of how many visibility projects in the bus sector were launched in Nanning, the unambitious city. You only really saw 3. And also you will see that one of them, this is the corruption scandal I was talking about, 2003, and then they started to lay low. And this is a cheap visibility project. Private firms don't care. They pay their bus to get rid of advertisement for a month, fine. And then in 2013, Nanning said, we're going to make the bus companies buy new energy buses. Now that is more of a large project, but it's still only 1, and it's not that frequent. So at the end of my analysis, 2013, nothing happened. Let me show you what happened in Guangzhou though. So the other case. State business relation had a very peaceful start. So privatization happened in 1994. And then 1998, you had your first visibility project, which was simply to apply for another city title, traffic management model city, whatever. 2001, apply to another model city, very cheap. 2002, and this is not even a visibility project. Guangzhou is really hot. It's like Florida and worse, in fact. So the city is like, our buses are old and people would love air conditioning. So let's put it on. So that's not even visibility, it's development. 2002, you have a new batch of buses. But very soon, 2004, so you started to have these officials say, we have to tap into the national air initiative now. We want you guys to do 2 things in 1 year. 1, apply to a model city title again, and then buy new energy buses. Change all of your buses into LPG and LNG fuel buses. City government says, we're not going to give you money for this. Unfortunately, just completely convert your bus fleet. The private companies at first resisted. They're like, we just got air-conditioned buses. It was like bleeding us dry. We can't do another batch, completely change them with different engines. And then they protested and they refused to go along. So I'm going to fail resistance. One of the bus companies, it's a Macau-owned company, says, we're going to sue the city government for asking us to buy buses beyond contract. Of course, they lost this legal case. And then this firm was kicked out from the sector in the name of tax evasion, a ton of them. Police actually went into the bus parking lot and then locked up the whole parking lot. So the bus company went out of business overnight. Other private firms watched this. They're like, we don't actually want to buy all these new buses, but look at what happened to the Macau company. We'd better go along. So all of the other companies started to go along. And they described the second batch of bus purchase a hemorrhage. But what else can you do? There are many ways the government can cause trouble for you. So they did that. But then what happened is it did not end right there. So 2005 was a key year for the city. The city won bid for the 2010 Asian Games. It's the Olympics of Asia. It's one of your best spotlight moments as a city leader. You want everything to run smoothly in the city, so you get promoted. And this guy actually did get promoted into one of the highest leaders in China. So they say, the buses have to join many other sectors and give us visibility projects, all 3 of them. They need to apply for another model city title. They need to now again change all of the buses that were just changed into an LPG bus into high capacity. So not just LPG, not just air conditioned, but they have to be big, large. And then Guangzhou decided we're going to build a BRT. So all of the bus companies have to change the mode of operation. So all 3 in the same year, on top of what happened previously, is eventually what brought down the private companies. it was a pretty violent process too. So a lot of them went on strikes. Some of the strikes are funny, they're passive resistance. So you have the bus companies, they decided collectively they're going to sabotage this, transport model city application. So you start to see these buses competing with each other on the street, and then they would not park at the bus stop. They park one lane away. So people have to walk through traffic to get to them. And then they refuse to park in designated, they were making a mess for the city. And then they refused to participate in BRT or buy any more buses. And the city government came in and said, you guys have to do this because Asian Games is going to happen. Private firms nope, not without proper compensation. And then the city government decided, we're going to nationalize all of you. It happened overnight, literally. It was very, very efficient. The way they did it is they sent this team, 17 together government bureaus, a team of these people, late night at 1 a.m., they started to knock on the door of the private bus company owners and say, here's your tax record. You clearly evaded tax 2 years ago, 3 years ago. We know where your children study. We know where your brother and sister work at, and your brother is a government employee. Don't make his life difficult. You can imagine this whole process of coercion. And then that's how nationalization was done. So you have the end of private sector because of this. So I'm going to stop right here because of time constraint. It's been 45 minutes. So yeah, questions will be welcome. I would like to tell you another part of the book just briefly. So the other part of the book, I'm going to stop sharing. It's about, so this is one way that you get environment sacrifice, which is you launch visibility projects, not caring about sustainability. In another sector where I did not, oh, that was my former student. In my another part of the book, it's not about visibility projects, it's about how else can the state and business collude to make environmental quality worse. So that's the waste incineration sector. In that sector, what happened is this. So the state government, the city governments would need, companies to come in and provide waste incineration. But this is a sector very popular with NIMBY protests. You always have people, boycotting waste incineration plant nearby. So the state and business basically collude, and the business will be the bad guy to try to prevent or suppress a protest. Government stands behind so that the government shields blame. Nobody will be blamed politically other than the firm. As a return, the state government would offer the firm, we're going to basically close our eyes for your, unconventional business operations, which will be the business trying to cut cost by not dealing with waste incineration in an environmentally sustainable way. So in that sector, it's a different story of environmental implications. In this one, it's more about wasteful public projects that does not deliver development. So that will be it. Yeah. Any question, comments will be very welcome. You can, yeah, you can monitor. Yeah.
If anyone online would like to ask questions.
PJ, do you have questions? Or your former firm?
Open for the questions.
Do you have any idea, when you look at your table with 4 parts, the project,
yes.
This project for government, do you have any idea of the dynamics of the proportion of submitted project in each part? If it's increasing, or if there is a switch between, or if there is some only the last one red, right?
This one?
Yes. Do you have any idea over time if there is some effect of government policy on their proportions or?
I don't. So I'm thinking whether I can do it, and I don't think I can do it because it's very hard to know, first of all, what is a rent-seeking project? In the bus sector, for example, I can probably discern what is developmental visibility, and what is pure visibility. I would never know what the rent-seeking projects.
Yeah, but just keeping the three,
Sure.
just to have an idea of these dynamics.
Yeah.
And just after that, given that the projects increase, for instance, in the right parts, if the number of success projects increase also or not. Because in your Cox analysis, you just have a picture of the collapse.
Yeah, of the firms.
Of the firms, but perhaps you have now there is more control and of the success. So in time after time, it's exactly what we can see here for European project or French project.
I see.
That people now we have waiting for true results and not just they try to check that what you affirm at the beginning is achieved. There is more control after.
I see.
So perhaps it's tend to change also. At the beginning, there is a lot of projects that answering the biodiversity questions, but nobody answered these questions. And now the people who do that try really to have an impact on biodiversity. So there is a huge set of projects at the beginning. And after that, there is quality generally.
That's actually a great question. I'm going to add that. Absolutely true. So the bus sector is just one sector. There were many sectors before the bus that went through the same cycle. What you're describing is absolutely true. So what happened is whenever the central government says, let's do something new, you will see a huge rise in visibility projects, huge. In this process, central government learns about it. Like, wait a minute, these projects are not doing what they need to be doing. And then you will see the projects move to developmental visibility projects, absolutely true. So there is absolutely a trend of between this cell to that cell. But this one, we still don't see much because, you know, by typology, there is no central government priority. So for most of the central government priority sectors, it's going to be here. So I would say AI, for example, in China right now is here. And then you will see also agriculture. So agriculture innovation is a huge thing. Pig farms, you know, security. There were really funny visibility projects in the husbandry sector. Did you guys see that 26-story high pig butcher plant in China? It's really interesting. Should I call it visibility projects? I can't decide yet. Nonetheless, this is a 26-story high building, all for pigs. So you have this elevator. The elevator is really fancy. Pig elevators. Put them on to like the 26th the top floor, and they somehow butcher them at the top floor, not the bottom. And then there's another elevator, like skillfully put all of the cute pigs right, down. And then in the middle, you have like pig feeding, et cetera, et cetera. You have a lot of that kind of thing going on. Same thing with seed. So the genetic modified seeding is an issue where China is still falling behind. So you suddenly saw, so this was about like 5-6 years ago, a lot of visibility projects where local government simply says, we're going to have a seeding lab. Now, does that lab work? Clearly, we don't see much result from these local government labs, like out of nowhere in a village. And then central government comes in and say there needs to be solid investment in R&D. It's not just building a plant, not a part of technology. And then they start to disappear. And then you will see the seeding industry moving into this part. So I think what you were describing is absolutely true. That's a great comment. I'm going to add it in my book. Yeah.
But you have data for the 90s.
In some sectors, yes. In my sectors, I do. Absolutely, yeah.
Just start about this on the figure elevator project. It happens that it is the structure actually which allow the best vegetal calorie to animal calorie transformation that exists, even if like the environmental and ethical conditions for the pigs are quite insane. So I think like it's very interesting in terms of how we see like meat consumption, because like if we just think about the amount of food we need to in order to feed the pig and to be environmentally friendly on that side, it's very efficient. If we think about it in terms of ethical situation for the pigs themselves, it's quite horrendous. I have a lot of questions, so I will just try to come back. The first is, we're talking about that privatization wave from, I think, 1996 up to 2006. Is it because the government decided like to diminish its investments and influence and to open it more to the private sector? Or is it just because the public sector decided to focus on other developmental issues and open those and say, okay, I'm not caring too much about those because I'm going to focus on something else, but still have the same level of investment. So yeah, just let's try the best.
Yeah, sure. So that's a great question. I should have said that more clearly. Both of the reasons. Number one, they were limited in capacity, both human resource and finance. Number two, back then, I mean, privatization was the way to go. People realized actually, particularly transportation. Transportation is never like a clear cut. Should it be public? Should it be private? Half of the world has private public transportation. The other half is state. Doesn't matter, right? And if you look at for the Chinese government and they look at the efficiency of these private bus companies can achieve, they're like, good idea. So both reasons stood. They still call for private investment now in the sector. So another interesting thing is the central government never said we want a public bus sector. To this day, they're like, let the private buses do it. Let the private buses do it. But the local governments are going against that part of the directive.
Yeah, another question I had, especially thinking about the water treatment that you were talking about before. So there's like an incredible growth rate for China, and if the infrastructure right now is not at its full capacity use, it might be in the coming years. And for example, a problem we have in Europe is that most of the big energy intensive or government infrastructure has an insanely big inertia. We have the transition to start the transition. And because of, as you said, the time scale for politicians being too small, they don't produce that type of project. So paradoxically, when I saw that, I was, oh, that's cool, because like it will be used later, and like it's going against the typical inertia that we find in Europe in terms of infrastructure. But would you say that, like, if we compare to a more like elective regimes for the politicians, so the time scale for politicians is one election, you consider that with that type of more top-down hierarchy and targets, the time scale for politicians is smaller than it would be for an elective system?
Great questions. So the first one, absolutely true, right? You can just be prepared for future population growth. But the issue is all of these plans also have a lifespan. So so we can actually do a calculation, and they did, right? You have 3 plants altogether. They are treating only 30% of the city's wastewater. Let's compound in population growth, and China's population growth is going down. Like, okay, so when will you get them to full capacity, right? So in that sample, for example, is 70 years, but the plant's lifespan is 30 to 40. You need to redo them again. You need to renovate. The cost is too high. So that part is for those. Unfortunately, I don't have data for every single plant in China on that one, but that's just my argument. And then the second one is, that's also a great question. So I wonder, and this is for discussion because I don't know for sure yet. I think in democracies to win an election, promise matters, right? You don't need to deliver a project. You can say, I'm going to build this project. But in China, and your promise is to the people, right? And also you don't actually, right, you're promising the people something. You need to signal to the public, you're like, this is what I'm going to do. And you know, if you don't do it, you will get punished in the next cycle. So they don't have the hastiness in some ways. And even if a project is in construction, probably will work. I wonder. Authoritarian state is different. You're promising to your boss, and your boss will not listen to promise. The boss looks at what is your achievement, what can you prove yourself? So you need to get it done very quick. So that's a time frame. It's not that they are, re-elected every 4 to 5 years for sure. It's just that one, they don't know when they're going to be promoted. Maybe it's next year, maybe it's 20 years later. So it's a little different in time calculation. But yeah, I'm still thinking about that. That's true. Yeah.
Questions. One is, what about other sectors of the administration, like the police, the army? Do you witness the same kind of inefficiencies, or is it much more efficient? If that's one. And my second question is linked to this beautiful book by David Graeber, The Utopia of Words. For his main argument, and he's focusing on Western bureaucracies. He's saying essentially, well, he's taking the macro viewpoint and opposed to the rather micro viewpoint that you took. So what you say essentially, if I correctly understand, is that there are strong internal incentives for bureaucrats to behave in a somehow inefficient way. Now, what he says is that since most Western bureaucracies are quite neoliberal, this is a way to set and force their own development of bureaucracy. Now, So they claim that they have to find a market solution for everything. And his viewpoint is to say market solutions just don't exist or are highly inefficient. So which is an excuse for the bureaucracy to develop. That is, you need more bureaucrats to implement something which is impossible. So you need more rules, more bureaucrats to check whether these rules are fulfilled, etc. And so I'm wondering whether you could make the same argument here from a macro perspective, saying, well, actually, if you consider the whole body of the Chinese bureaucracy, you need the full height of projects that we're describing in the dichotomy. Think some of them to be successful, otherwise it's a complete mess. But you might also need some of them to be purely visible, because this is more, it's more insane. I don't know, it's just more excuses for the workers of doing art. Because if it's a failure, they will need more people to check that it's a failure, to repair, and that's good for the workers, even though that's bad for people. So I'm wondering whether the same kind of argument would work with a completely, of course, different ideology. But at the end of the day, if you think of the society of bureaucracy, at least since Max Weber, maybe it works, I don't know.
That's interesting. So when you're saying that this might prompt bureaucratic development and check and balance within the bureaucracy, did you mean it was intentionally done so, or it could be a good side effect?
It's a social phenomenon. So I don't know whether anybody thinks about it, but it happens to be the emerging phenomenon that you observe, at least in Western bureaucracies. That's Freud's argument. So it's really a macro phenomenon. It's not a micro one. So nobody thinks to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Needs to think about it.
Okay, yeah, that's a good comment. I'm going to keep it down. Okay. But the Weber one, the ideal type is bureaucracy purely based on meritocracy.
Not just, bureaucrats have secrets that gives them power, according to Max Weber, etc., etc. So, and meritocracy, I mean, all the Western idea of meritocracy actually comes from China.
What?
Yeah.
Really? What is it?
18th century, the European elites discovered the Mandarin school in China and decided to have national examination tests, which were copied upon from what China was doing back then. Before that, we never had that in Europe. So in the first countries which did that,
Interesting.
And then this is where we started to do examination tests that most of us here have passed in France in order to become high civil servant. And this is an imitation of China.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And people highlighting officials in some cases, registration factors.
I would do exactly the same. And we didn't have this before some Jesuit missionaries came back from China and told this to the European elite and said, well, what the Chinese are doing this funny to us.
That's interesting. I'm gonna look that up. That's so much fun. I'm a strict, strong critique of the China's exam system. So yeah, I write about it, and when you have a strict top-down quantitative evaluation system, not just China but everywhere, the thing is, if you tie it to individual outcome, not say organizational outcome, it's gonna go wrong. Like if you say you as a leader don't do this level of income per capita, you're gonna lose your job, you're going to get less bonus, it's absolutely gonna be gamed. And that's what I see to be the biggest difference between China and the West. So in the West, they use quantitative evaluation in governments and business, but it's always only tied to organizational outcomes, and it's usually used as a check, an incentive. It's not gonna have any punitive outcome, so people gain less. So that's how I see it. But that's very interesting. I'm gonna look it up. True, the word Mandarin is Chinese. It comes from Mandarin. Yeah. Okay.
I had a question about developmental projects and whether they tend to be if there's a movement in visibility project, developmental visibility project, that's developmental when the central government moves on, and then or is it more stuff that needs to be done anyway, and so local governments do it?
I think it could move both ways. So I'm again just trying to think. It could move from here to here. It could move from here to here. Mm-hmm. Sometimes local governments do developmental projects without any central prompt. Later, central government think that's a great idea. Let's put into a national priority, and then they add a visibility feature to it. So I've seen that too. But yeah, that's a good question. This is my latest thing. Like I just wrote this up a month ago, so this is great. I'm still thinking about it. Yeah. They need to be careful with developmental projects. So this is one thing I realized. One of the local officials from a very rich county decided that I want to give my people universal healthcare, purely developmental. He said my county just needs it. Central government doesn't want it. What happened to this guy is because he successfully launched universal healthcare, the national government actually got angry because he set a bad example that, look, this is what we could have done, but only this county is doing it, not the national government. It's showing the national government doesn't care. So they fired that person. So that was when it's too developmental outside of the party line. Yeah. So I wonder how many people are only doing that.
Sorry, what about the police and the army?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. So your question was, do we see the same phenomenon? I don't know enough to say that. I really don't know enough to say that. Yeah.
Actually, my question was quite related. I'm not sure to understand fully the relation, the point of view of the central government, because we could imagine that the rationale is to say, okay, we provide a direction, and then everybody tries to do something, and among those projects, we can imagine that a handful at least will end up on the upper right panel. But then, even if you detect a few good projects, the system apparently makes that you cannot even implement it at a larger scale because everybody then will try to do a little differently. And so I'm not sure to understand, what's the goal of the central government to leave this kind of freedom and at the same time being unable to implement what it wants in the end?
I think so. I only can guess. And so one of the policy-making tradition in China that really benefited the Chinese central government was local experiments. So it's such a huge country, central government's and they're wise. They're like, we can't know what's the best. There would not be one recipe for everywhere. We need to have the local officials figure out what is the best for them. So there's a lot of that kind of consideration built into this. That's why the vagueness. What I observe is the central government is always, as a result, one step behind, gaming. They can never predict gaming. And this is also tied to, this is authoritarianism. They have very limited information, source. They can never predict something is going wrong until that thing goes wrong. And then they start to correct a mistake. They're very bad at preventing mistakes. So this is an intrinsic authoritarianism issue to me. Is that all the questions you asked? Did I get it all?
No, that's it.
Okay.
It's really clear. Yeah,
okay.
I have a question on your deprivatization aspects, which I found interesting, and I was wondering, so you give that explanation that the region was probably, let's say, economy, to try to just not spend public money on these feasibility projects. And I was wondering if it was the only explanation, because, well, I don't know how much local officials could expect it, but obviously, as they ask too many things from these local firms, they end up either having to give them subsidies or to just nationalize them so that in the end they just bear the cost themselves, which might be even more costly than if they had given subsidies or done it themselves in the first place. So could there be also some political incentives to do that? And I was thinking of either maybe please the central government on that keep things private directive that you said was given, or maybe also you talked about that blaming questions, so the fact that sometimes private firms are useful and it might be useful to keep them so that if things turn out to be not working or not ending up as expected, you could blame them instead of the local government. And I also thought a very possible political reason might be that you don't want to shoot too much of your power and on your intervention in things so that people won't feel oppressed by your presence in every sector. So that might also be a reason for it. I don't know.
No.
This might be playing a role as well along the economic one, which is, well, I mean, in a myopic way, rational, but in the end not so rational.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And those are great, like alternative hypotheses. So that's why that book is so pessimistic about like the future of, policymaking in China. What did I look of? So myopic is absolutely true. And there is an institutional reason for that. Because the CCP, the national government, worries so much about local lords from forming that could challenge the center, there is one institutional arrangement, which is regular rotation of city leaders. They have to move. After 3 to 5 years, you gotta move. It's just that everybody hopes it's not a lateral move, it's a promotion. And so when people think about long-term sustainability, it's basically this rotation is killing it. It's creating, so what it's called the roving bandits, right? People don't care about future. We nationalize. Yes, there will be more subsidies, there will be more, state expense, but that's the next administration's issue. So there's also, it's another authoritarian thing coming into this door. Yeah. But what you said absolutely is right, makes sense.
What it means that like the exchange between cities.
Yeah, they don't get promoted and move to the same position, but in a different locality. Yeah.
I guess it means.
Yeah. You see a lot of the interesting is the mayor, for example, one of this famous mayor who went down, 大同的市长耿彦波, the mayor of Datong, this guy, he's famous. So he always builds tourism towns. Wherever he goes, he's going to build a tourism town. And then he's going to like establish like fake ancient houses and temples and attract people to come for tourism. So people bring their projects around. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Maybe it's a difficult question to answer, I don't know, but we have enough data on those. Know if it actually like makes a difference in how the trust system is managed, or if it's maybe more sustainable that way than the real project product.
So I don't have enough data. I have the data from cities that I interviewed. All of them get into fiscal trouble. So buses in a lot of smaller cities, the #1 public spending now for governments. That's why they privatize it in the first place. Quality-wise, it's hard to say. So quality-wise, you will see an interesting same trend. So in privatization, when privatization was at the peak of it, everybody's praising how much better bus quality is. Right before the government is gonna nationalize these companies, you will see like waves of attack on private buses. Same thing is happening now in like after nationalization. You will at first say, see, bus quality is so much better in the media. Now they're saying, wait a minute, they're not doing well. They're cutting off routes because they're in trouble financially. So we need to attract more private bus companies. So they're doing it again. They're trying to attract private companies back. Hard to know. It's very difficult to measure quality here. Yeah.
I think it's a good question.
Yep. Hi, TJ.
By the way, he's an excellent.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for giving this talk. It's really interesting. I was just kind of curious about, like, I'm thinking about private bus companies, if they're using, established public infrastructure the way that any other car would, I get that maybe some people would debate whether or not that access is sort of like government provided, but I think, I don't know. I think they can kind of get a pass for that, but I'm curious about these projects like the bus rapid transit option that do require massive infrastructure overhaul and sort of like the appropriation of land and the restructuring of infrastructure for private entities, but that restructuring is being performed by the government, and so there is like it seems like some of these transit solutions are going to require a deep level of public-private partnership. And so I'm just curious, like, how you see in your research that relationship being navigated in China, or maybe even what you think would be a better system if you are critical of that system. Does that make sense? I don't know. I know it's kind of long-winded, but
so you're asking about the public
essentially like
infrastructure?
Yeah, and like basically like eminent domain and like just the way that property rights would be appropriate. Like a private entity doesn't have the power alone to go and run a rapid transit system through the middle of a city. So I'm just I guess I'm just wondering how that fits into this discussion of public versus private bus systems.
Yeah, so there was one of the policy debates before they launched the BRT system is that they could just have private bus companies outside of the BRT system, which is only like usually in the main area of the city, and then have the state purely be responsible for the BRT system. So separate public and private funding. Actually, that was one of the proposals the city governments got, but the city government could not afford it. Again, that was the issue. And so they attracted the private companies, but did not clearly give them enough returns. The contract was not accepted by the private companies. It could totally be done in a public-private partnership. Like in terms of feasibility, there's no question of it. A lot of the countries did it. It's just that in China, the contract fell through. They never got on the same terms in the process, in the failed cities anyways. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that helps. And does that like, do you know exactly where that broke down? Was it that like the government was basically like demanding too much of the private companies, or again, the government just didn't have the funding to make it an effective relationship with the private companies? Like what?
It essentially comes down to that. Private companies is like investment part, we're taking too much, but profit side, we're not getting enough. And also because of the long history of the city government reneging on previous contracts, where they ask the companies to buy new buses, even though they shouldn't, the private companies, the credible commitment mechanism is completely broken down. So the private companies don't even trust the city government, like in terms of respecting contract. Yeah, particularly after they lost the court case. They're like, okay, then the system is against us. So there was a lot of that kind of failure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Very, very good comments. Thank you.
Thank you.